to another episode of the Modern Manifestation Podcast. I'm your host, Bree Brown, a lettuce-hating, wine-loving, curses like a sailor, recovering perfectionist. Having thrived in a male-dominated, commission-based industry, I'm passionate about helping women boldly pursue their life goals. In this space, we build confidence with our mindset, manifestation, and spirituality. I believe that your life manifests as a result of who you are, not what you do, and that your personality creates your personal reality. Join this growing community to increase your net worth by increasing your self-worth. Now let's jump into today's topic. Hello, my beautiful souls, and welcome back to the Modern Manifestation Podcast. Today, I want to talk about a really powerful form of manifesting. In the past, as you guys know, I've talked a lot about how we manifest through our identities, our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. But as I've studied manifestation more over the years, there's an element that I've left out of this equation: the force required to build those new identities, which then change your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Because no one completely changes who they are on a whim. People don't just wake up one day and they're like, oh, I'm going to be this entirely new person for shits and giggles. We need something a lot more substantial in order to make us commit to an entirely new persona. Something that'll drive us to create that meaningful change in our identity. And this force is what today's episode is all about. It's what I'm going to focus on. And before I tell you what it is, yes, I'm going to do that little cliffhanger thing. Let's discuss why it's important. This force is usually that missing piece between someone who's successful and someone who is not. Someone who's able to accomplish the things they want and someone who doesn't. Even if you've both done quote-unquote everything right. You could have had tremendous personal growth, worked on your mindset, built a fantastic routine for yourself, worked on your past traumas, did the shadow work, rebuilt your habits and your lifestyle, found emotional resiliency and stability, and even do all of those manifestation exercises that we recommend, and still not manifest what you want. And you might be scratching your head and you're like, what the hell? Why is it not happening for me? So the question is, why? What could be the reason? Is it just that the universe is an asshole? I mean, while I've questioned it, no. There's a force that has propelled some of our greatest minds toward success and birthed some of the brightest identities that have contributed to history. And it's so simple that when I first heard it, I laughed. I laughed at how obvious it was, how long I'd overlooked this, how important it is to manifestation. It's just so damn simple that I found it amusing and also annoying. And I hope y'all know that it's taking everything I have right now not to make a Star Wars reference about the Force. But what is this force that I'm talking about? This force is passion. We manifest with passion, or really I should say through passion, things that we are passionate about. Passion is what leads us to create those new lasting identities one day. When you wake up, you don't just change your identity because it's spring. There's something deep within you that's been triggered that causes you to create this new identity, this new persona. And it changes what we choose to show up for moving forward. So the more passionate we are about changing something, the more likely we are to create it. And unfortunately, myself included, many of us just aren't connected enough with our passions. Many of us go through life feeling bored, busy, entertained, annoyed, but rarely passionate about something. So sometimes, especially when I'm getting to know someone at first, I'll ask them what they're passionate about. And you would be surprised at how often this question stumps people. This past weekend, I was at a South by Southwest event here in Austin, and I asked the guy next to me what he was passionate about. And he paused for an awkward amount of time and finally said, I guess sales. And while this could be true for him, I find it hard to believe that someone's passion in life, the reason they show up every day, what drives them, is selling product, increasing a company's revenue. And don't get me wrong, being passionate about how sales can change your lifestyle, that's one thing. But passionate about cold calling and selling a product, I don't know, as someone in sales, that doesn't resonate with me. If I were to guess, he was probably more passionate about what he gets out of sales and not sales itself. But I bring this up to demonstrate that few people have any idea what passion really is, and even fewer have a decent answer about what drives them. So if you were asked this question right now, could you answer it? What are you passionate about? I couldn't, at least not initially. I had to do a little soul searching to rediscover what drives me. It took a lot of journaling. And at first, my answer was a lot like the South by Southwest guys. I was like, empowering people to manifest their best lives. It's even a tagline on my website. But this was too broad, too impersonal. It didn't have that spark within me. That's not the kind of statement that's going to get me to show up and choose to work on my podcast over binging Netflix on the weekend. And while helping people manifest is a huge part of what I love to do, it's not my passion. That's not the thing that drives me. It's an element of it, but it's not the thing. So I sat with this question some more and I began to write a lot of things down. I dug deeper within myself. And I realized that this is why all of those online courses, those coaches, those TED Talks you listen to, everyone says, find your why. This is why they want you to do that. It's just another form of discovering your passion. Your why is your passion. Yes, I want to empower people to manifest their best lives, but why? Why was this important to me? I had to keep going through the layers. And I won't walk you through my entire process, but I eventually found my passion. Freedom. Freedom for myself, freedom for others, financial freedom, freedom to travel, freedom to take off work, freedom to bestow gifts onto others, freedom to support minority business owners, freedom to pay it forward. The idea of unlimited freedom is so sexy to me that I pretend that everything I do, no matter how small, is paying for my freedom, some sort of freedom that I want. And some tasks pay pennies, some pay thousands. And I even view things like this podcast as payments toward my freedom, because every time we provide value to the world, that's energetic currency for the things we want. And of course, that's not why I do this, but viewing it that way helps me feel more abundant. It feels like I'm constantly generating currency for myself, freedom currency. So if you're struggling to figure out what you're passionate about, this might explain why you're struggling to manifest or derive clarity. If you lack passion, you lack spiritual direction. You're on a road trip without a map. And this revelation has changed a lot of shit for me. I haven't been focused on my passions enough lately. And maybe that's why this episode felt so necessary. Because by sharing it with you guys, I feel like I'm bashing it into my own thick head. But when you really think about it, the really cool thing about passion is that it's like this amazing gift we've been given. Because what other species can we look to and say that they experience passion? The need to create, to experience. And not just out of necessity or survival, but out of desire. Passion is a gift that is unique to the human experience. It has led to humanity's greatest achievements, to creations that we've experienced every day. A passion for opportunities, ideas, a better world, self-improvement, a passion to live and experience things differently. This is our gift from Spirit. This is a tool that we can use to grow and change, to better the world around us. And I know y'all have heard me talk a lot about identities and how our identities manifest through our reality. Passion is what drives our change in identity. Logic and rationality rarely get us to change our identities. The only thing that really gets us to alter our identity so much that we change careers, we change habits, even change aspects of our personalities, that's passion. However, passion should not just be confused for an emotion. I used to think that passion was simply just an intense version of an emotion. But it's more than that. Passion is this catalyst for an identity change. It's the catalyst, it's the foundation for how we manifest the things we want. We get excited about them. We allow this excitement to seep into various areas of our lives, and we keep running with that until this energy bears fruit for us. So passion's really special for us. It's a combination of your soul's excitement, your emotional connection, even your spiritual journey. And recently I was reading a book by Adamus Saint Germain, and he was quoted saying, "The passion of the soul has brought enlightenment into this human realm." Passion was the vehicle in which enlightenment came to us as a species. So knowing all of this, passion has changed how I define the manifestation equation. I used to say, your identity is what created your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and I would loop passion in with your emotions. But now I say it's passion determines your identity, which determines your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And a good example of passion driving an identity change would be to contemplate someone in your life where whenever you reconnected with someone years later, they were radically different. Usually, you'll find that they're passionate about something when you reconnect with them. It could be a job, relationship, religion, social movement, art. And you might initially think they're being fake because they're so different. Or they're so different than they were. Hell, I used to think this about a lot of people in my life. I'd be like, oh wow, they really changed. They're so fake now. No. We awaken to who we truly are when we discover our passion. Or I should say rediscover, because our souls have always known. Passion allows us to step into the identities that are more aligned with our souls. And this version of us can be unrecognizable to the people who knew us before the change. And then we step outside of that box, the box they placed us in that was all nice and neat. And now we have to redefine that person, and that's uncomfortable for us. We don't like change. But that's on us, it's not on them. I have 2 examples of people in my life that went through this radical sort of change. And the first story I'll talk about is, we're going to call him Mario. I knew Mario in Houston from junior high pretty much through high school. And throughout that time, he got bad grades, he kept to himself, he dressed in baggy clothes, he didn't make much of an effort to connect with anyone, he just seemed generally quiet to himself, a little unhappy. And one day in 10th grade, he showed up and he was an entirely different person. Like something had changed in the summer between 9th and 10th grade. And at the start of our sophomore year, all of a sudden he was wearing button-down shirts with slacks, his hair was combed back, he was socializing with people, he had dropped all of his on-level classes, which are like the lowest classes, and signed up for advanced placement. And at first I was like, what the hell's going on with this guy? Like, why is he all different all of a sudden? How is he going to do this? But then I began to watch him engage in class over time. And I noticed that he'd completely altered even the way he acted from times I've encountered him before. Like his whole personality was completely different. And I found out that he had found himself a mentor. And this mentor was also a Hispanic male that he could look up to. And this mentor showed him what was possible for himself if he were able to go to college. And so he became passionate about the idea of college and being the first in his family to go, and the potential to make 6 figures when he got out. And he became so passionate about the security that this idea provided that he allowed it to create a whole new identity for himself. He held on to that vision and allowed it to completely change his circumstances. So much so that Mario started going by another name. And for the remaining 3 years of high school, he never went back. He continued to be that new person that he became. And it really turned around his whole life. I checked in with him on LinkedIn recently, and he seems to be doing really well for himself. And I'm not saying that college was the thing that made him successful. It wasn't. I think he could have gone to trade school. I think he could have started his own company. Whatever it was, it's just the fact that he saw an opportunity for security, for financial security. And he had a mentor that showed him it was possible. And then he latched onto this idea and became passionate about this opportunity. And for him, it was the idea that college could completely change the course of his family's circumstances, an opportunity to create generational wealth, to break old patterns. And the only reason this became true for him is because he believed it would. He became, so he received. And he was the first in his family to go to college. The second story I'm going to talk about, for the purpose of this story, we'll call her Nadia. And when I first met her, she was pre-med. She was also miserable. But everyone in her family had a really prestigious career. They were doctors and lawyers or high up in finance. You get the drift. So she decided that she was going to become a doctor also. She dressed very professionally, spoke seriously, and really feared disappointing her family. Probably more than anyone I'd ever met. And it probably wouldn't come as a surprise to you, but she was also battling depression and struggling to continue on the medical path because she didn't like it. So one day, she made a really difficult decision. She decided to end the pre-med program and roll into the liberal arts school and begin studying graphic design. And as you can imagine, this was not easy news to break to her family. And she kept it from them for a little while because she feared that dropping out of her pre-med program would basically make her family disown her. And it was definitely difficult for them to accept, but they eventually came around to it. But her art called her so strongly that she did it anyway. She switched her major, became an artist, got into graphic design, And there was a huge shift in her immediately. All of a sudden, she was happier. She felt lighter to be around. Her wardrobe became edgy and chic, and it looked more like her. I can't really describe it other than it seemed to embody who she was. She changed the way she spoke and acted. Her whole identity changed. And more importantly, things started working out for her because all of a sudden she was following her passion. And while her luck in the pre-med program seemed to be at a standstill, new opportunities seemed to form in this art program, which is kind of surprising because I feel like that's a pretty cutthroat thing to be a part of too. And for whatever reason, these opportunities were just like effortlessly presenting themselves to her. And it was pretty clear that she was experiencing a lot of success in the arts than she had in her pre-med program. But it was her passion that drove her to change her identity, which then allowed her to change her major and everything else about herself. Let your passions serve you, is the moral of both of those stories. Passion makes everything we do way more effective. No matter how much you try to visualize or journal or 55 by 5 your way to success, it will not work unless you're connected to your passion while doing it. Otherwise, you're just checking off a box on your to-do list. Because these practices are not doing anything for you if they lack your passion, your deep emotion, your love for what you're wanting to create. So when you visualize, do not stop until you're so connected with your passion that you're excited to continue on your day. Do not stop journaling until you're bursting with love and gratitude for your life. Passion for both the life you're living and the life you're planning for yourself. And some days it may only take you 2 to 3 minutes to get connected to your passions. And then on other days, it's taken me as long as an hour. It's always much harder when I'm in a bad mood. But I also think that's when it's so worthwhile trying to get there. Because at the end of the day, this process can completely turn my day around. Embrace a practice of passion, or passion practice, whatever you want to call it. So if you're doing anything with the intent to manifest, ask yourself whether or not you're deeply feeling into it, feeling what you're passionate about creating. Because if you're not, that's why it's not working. Your passion's what drives everything anyway. It literally attracts things to you. The problem that we have in our society is that we live in a world where people don't appreciate other people who try to follow their passions. Instead, we try to discourage or shit talk people who do. We try to make fun of them for trying to go after something they're passionate about. But you will also find that most people value resources over passion. And a lot of times, if people are shit-talking you, it's just because they're jealous they're not following their own. And you have the audacity to. And they're like, well, how dare you step out of the box and do the thing I'm afraid to do for myself? That's all it is. Most people are intimidated by those who follow their passions. They want to keep you down where they are. Say you're making a fool of yourself. Say that you have some nerve to try and change. And that's fine. They're communicating their own limitations, and that's fine. They can't see your vision for yourself because they don't have your passion for it. And they're not supposed to share your passions. They have their own. They can't understand what they're not in alignment with. And that's fine. Find your passion and keep chasing it relentlessly. So many people pursue things they're passionate about temporarily and then allow this limited programming or the social programming to convince us that we won't make it. So we stop before it gets good. Don't let your old beliefs cloak themselves in logic to override what you're passionate about. Your programming, it comes from society anyway, from the past, the way things were. And your programming is just going to keep you where you are, experiencing more of the same. Whereas your passion, that comes from your soul. That comes from the possibility of a different future. Your passion drives new opportunities toward you. It attracts new circumstances and experiences to you. So if things are feeling a little stuck, ask yourself whether or not you're following your passions, the things that drive you. So if your identity is the car that gets you where you want to go, passion's the gasoline. And the road before you is life experiences. And you can choose to stay pulled over, off to the side, or you can floor it and go forward. Pursue your passions at all costs. Allow them to mold you into the person driven by your passions, to change your identity permanently, not just temporarily, to propel you into an entirely new reality, a new timeline. a new quantum reality. So I hope this episode helped you get a little bit more inspired today. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will catch y'all in the next episode. I hope y'all enjoyed today's episode. If you want to check out the show notes, head over to www.themodernmanifestation.com/blog. If you're loving this podcast, please drop me a review, share this episode with a loved one, and follow me on Instagram @modernmanifestation. I love y'all so much, and thanks for listening.